What conspiracy theory is too logical to be ignored? Story 1, the lost cosmonauts. Basically, the theory that the Soviets actually sent more people into space and were doing so long before they said they had succeeded, but those people never made it home, so they covered it up. If the Soviet Union was willing to sacrifice thousands of its own people for the sake of covering up a nuclear disaster that was capable of turning Europe into a nuclear wasteland, there is no doubt in my mind that they'd be willing to cover up a few cosmonauts who made it into space but then didn't return home. Hell, there were many cover-ups of fatalities in their space program that we know about. Who's to say there aren't more? Story 2. Honestly, the government knows all about us and is watching us. If you think about it, they have access to everything and everyone literally has a number assigned to them at birth. The government can look at anything they want at any time, and tailing is a legitimate thing. It's highly reasonable to think about this, whether as a theory or not, and it's difficult to truly ignore once you pay attention to the facts. Of course, it isn't hidden knowledge, and personally, I don't see a reason to be freaking out constantly. I completely understand people being stressed and paranoid and jumping to the conclusion that the government has more power over us than we can even think about. Story 3. Over the years, I've become more and more convinced that the 1962 Alcatraz escapees survived. I think it was very plausible. I've swum from Alcatraz Island across the bay dozens of times in open water events, in many different weather and current conditions. I've swum the entire distance around the island and the distance under the span of the Golden Gate. The water in June, when they escaped, is not that cold, and the currents are actually helpful if used to one's advantage. Alcatraz is not as far out as it appears from shore either. I can do it in 35 minutes, and I'm not any kind of champion swimmer, just someone who likes to swim in open water. I do recognize these guys were not swimmers at all, but they had a raft, and with steady progress and a go with the current mentality, they could have easily made the shore. Story 4. There was a lot of alien controversy during the 50s through to the 70s. It's all the Americans talked about. Aliens, and how they were abducted. I suppose it seems pretty obvious. I just like talking about it. Those UFOs the Americans saw and covered up as weather balloons were actually spy gear. I believe the Americans used new technology to spy on other countries, such as Russia, and that these sightings were their technology, so that they weren't caught. They let rumors spread about aliens. The American government didn't care. It just took the spotlight off them making planes and etc. to spy on other countries. I mean, what would you rather let the public believe? That you're spying at other countries' military bases, or that aliens have infiltrated Earth? Story 5. The idea that the British government let Coventry be bombed in the war because to intervene would have tipped off the Germans, that we could read their communication. In November 1940, Coventry was badly bombed by the Luftwaffe. The conspiracy goes that Churchill had advanced warning of the attack after German communications were intercepted and cracked as we knew the Enigma code. However, this information came hours before the attack, and Coventry is not an obvious target. The RAF suddenly appearing in the skies of the Midlands to intercept German bombers, and the city itself being evacuated, would give away to the Germans that Britain knew what they were up to too. They could well suspect the Enigma code was compromised, so Churchill let it happen. We don't know if it's true, and it's likely not. Churchill did receive warnings of a bombing raid, but the only other person in the room recalled him mentioning it would be London. However, it's a great conspiracy theory because it's logical and the motivation makes sense. It also poses an interesting question for people to debate. Story 6. The connection between PETA and meat or agriculture industries. Nobody takes PETA seriously. That's incredibly useful to organizations like Tyson, Purdue, or any mass producer of poultry/beef/pork. Due to their antics, they're incredibly easy to dismiss. You don't make a foe like that go away. These companies can take whatever legitimate criticisms they receive and package them into whatever PETA is up to in a single dismissal. Oh, you want to talk about sustainability? Like those PETA nut jobs. They throw paint on old ladies. Why don't you come back when you're ready to have a serious discussion? It's worth it to the meat and agriculture industry to keep PETA around and well-funded enough to avoid being reasonable. Story 7. Murder wind. Natural wind can hit something just right and it will make an infrawave sound, not ultrawave. This sound drives people insane very quickly. I don't remember the name, but a large group of Russian college students all died while they were trying to become senior mountain climbers/hikers. It was complete chaos, and there are a lot of theories around it, but one of the most logical is murder wind. Note, if you want to know more about it, there are a lot of podcasts that make great episodes about it. One in particular is Monday Morning Macabre. Story 8. The Illuminati is real, or at least a secret, ultra-powerful organization. I don't believe in that New World Order crap, but I believe that there are certain people pulling strings and making things happen around the world to make it a better place. You don't need Illuminati or any other secret society for rich people to have huge influence. When you mix politics with business interests, you get a situation in which the richest people have the most power and can make all sorts of shady deals. I believe that the whole talk about Illuminati and Freemasons, etc., is a conspiracy promoted by the elites. They want us to chase some imaginary occult groups and boogeymen. That doesn't threaten the power of elites. Conspiracy theorists aren't promoting change for the economic system that benefits the rich. Conspiracy theorists don't talk about inequality or poverty. They only talk about some Satanists who eat children. Conspiracy theorists aren't interested in making the world a better place. They are only making us more afraid and hysterical. And then you get Canoon and all that. And that group isn't going to solve poverty or hunger. Story 9, that there actually might not be any gold in Fort Knox. There's a lot of stuff that doesn't add up about it. And I've been there in my time in the Army, and it was boring as crap, with a pretty relaxed security as compared to other installations I've been on. When this conspiracy was hitting its peak in 2017, Treasury Secretary Stephen Mnuchin took a $27,000 military aircraft trip there. There are pictures of him in a weird chalkboard-lined room with several stacks of what appear to be gold bars behind him. But oddly enough, these pictures are in a grainy black and white, so you can't actually confirm what he's holding. Before this trip, the last known outside audit of Fort Knox was in 1953. It's the only conspiracy I can get. Story 10. That there was an advanced civilization of humans more than 12,000 years ago. The slow process of evolution means humans were basically the same then as they are now. First account of farming started around 11,000 years ago, at the same time everywhere, and most marginations of human lineages can be traced before this time. Hint, there are plenty of incredible stone architecture, most of Egypt, and some Greek, Middle Eastern, Inca-exed stonework that makes even modern engineers crap themselves in trying to replicate it with modern tools. Stonework that happens to be dated back to the oldest known people to have lived in the area, who either didn't claim building it themselves or it being simply too practically impossible for them to have built it. Just look at the boxes of the boxes, Serapeum in Egypt, or the stone walls of the Inca for some examples. There was a major catastrophic event around 12,000 years ago that wiped out around half of the megafauna, including at the time a rather large mammoth population. Evidence of this event includes a black, charred layer covering most of the northern hemisphere, similar to the one that is connected to the meteor that ended the dinosaurs. Around this time, there was also massive flooding across the whole planet, rapid cooling and heating events, and a rapid sea level rise of over 100 m. There is some scientific debate about this being caused by a couple of meteorites. This event would also have easily sent any civilization as advanced as ours back to the Stone Age. Story 11. Militarized dolphins. There was plenty of training and research on both sides in the Cold War on whether dolphins and/or other marine creatures could have military usages, such as defending ships, locating lost divers, attaching homing devices, torpedoes, etc. With the fall of the Soviet Union, the dolphin program in the USSR passed to the Ukrainian Navy and was ultimately sold to Iran. Military dolphins have seen a resurgence since the annexation of Crimea, and it seems Russia is reinvesting in military dolphins. It should also be noted that militarized dolphins act as guard dogs for a good chunk of the U.S. nuclear stockpiles. Story 12. The CIA tried to install a puppet government in Australia during the 70s. General Smedley Butler was the most decorated soldier in U.S. history at the time. I spent 33 years and 4 months in active military service, and during that period I spent most of my time as a high-class muscle man for big business, for Wall Street and the bankers. In short, I was a racketeer, a gangster for capitalism. I helped make Mexico, and especially Tampico, safe for American oil interests in 1914. I helped make Haiti and Cuba a decent place for the National City Bank boy to collect revenues in. I helped in the raping of half a dozen Central American republics for the benefit of Wall Street. I helped purify Nicaragua for the international banking house of Brown Brothers in 1902 to 1912. I brought light to the Dominican Republic for the American sugar interests in 1916. I helped make Honduras right for the American fruit companies in 1903. In China in 1927, I helped see to it that Standard Oil went on its way unmolested. Looking back on it, I might have given Al Capone a few hints. The best he could do was to operate his racket in 3 districts. I operated on 3 continents. Story 13. It's possible everybody has allergies these days, partially because of how trees were planted since the arbor movement started in the mid-20th century. Basically, mostly male trees have been planted because there was a backlash against female trees, which drop fruit and seed pods and make a mess of people's pretty lawns, city streets and landscaped gardens, and lawns for businesses and industrial parks. Municipalities didn't want to clean up the mess, and so it was suggested that while planting trees for a green future was good, We should only plant male trees because they only shed pollen. And now, look at how many weird allergies. Story 14. Conspiracy theorists get the facts wrong but often get the feelings right. The feeling of living in a world with shadowland. The feeling that every human misery is someone else's profit. The feeling of being exhausted by predation and extraction. The feeling that important truths are being hidden. The word for the system driving those feelings starts with C. But if no one ever taught you how capitalism works, and instead told you it was all about freedom and sunshine and Big Macs, and playing by the rules to get the life you deserve, then it's easy to see how you might confuse it with another C word, conspiracy. Story 15. The US is run by a corporate oligarchy, and the global power elite exists as a class of themselves, for themselves. They have complete class solidarity and see the rest of us, even the upper middle class, as cattle. We do not have any real say in our politics or how our society is run, and both the Democratic and Republican candidates are corporate picks and ultimately serve as puppets for their desires. Even the media is not free, and the majority of them serve as mouthpieces for the elite. You think the New York Times is unbiased? Sure, Jan. Story 16. One actual truth that often appears to be a conspiracy theory is the existence of government surveillance programs like the NSA's PRISM program. Before it was publicly exposed by Edward Snowden in 2013, the idea that governments were conducting widespread surveillance on their own citizens was dismissed by many as a conspiracy theory. However, Snowden's revelations confirmed that the U.S. government, through the NSA, was indeed collecting and analyzing vast amounts of data from the communications of ordinary people, often without their knowledge or consent. This truth seemed outlandish to many before the evidence came to light, blurring the line between conspiracy theory and reality. Story 17. Nixon's campaign people secretly sending an unofficial emissary to sink the '68 Vietnam peace talks against the efforts of the U.S. government of the time, and guaranteeing years more dead Vietnamese, Laotians, Cambodians, and Americans. In order to rob the Democrats of a big win going into the election, he would then go on to win. The Chenault affair. Also, more fun conspiracy stuff. LBJ had recordings of the Nixon campaign talking about this. He had the FBI tapping the Nixon campaign's phones and admitted this to Nixon, and the White House plumbers were almost certainly breaking into the Watergate Hotel in order to find the location of these recordings. It is confirmed that previous break-ins they committed at other locations were about trying to find these recordings. The White House file on the matter was in fact hidden in the LBJ Presidential Library in an envelope marked with an X, quickly becoming known as the X-File. I cannot stress enough that all of this is an official historical record, confirmed more recently, Reagan's people doing the same with the Iran hostage crisis going into the 1980 election. Story 18. 10 days prior to the '68 Mexico City Olympics, there were student protests gathered at a square, and the Mexican government sent the military to placate. However, they also hired secret hitmen who infiltrated a nearby apartment building to purposefully snipe at the military, so as to provoke them into shooting at the students, thinking the shooting was coming from them. Official estimates placed the deaths at 30, 40, but later estimates in the decades that followed placed it closer to the 100. After the incident, they then kept everything hushed, including in the newspapers, so that the Olympics could go forward undisturbed. People wouldn't know about the secret sniper agent until the ruling party that had governed uninterruptedly for 70-plus years finally lost, and the new party could unearth classified documents. Story 19. John Lennon was an insecure man who definitely had some paranoid thoughts throughout his life. So when he moved to the U.S. in the 1970s, and people would call him, he would warn them that his phones were tapped, that the Nixon administration and the FBI were targeting him specifically because of his politics. He thought people were following him and that they were intentionally messing with his immigration status. He even talked about it in interviews. Years later, after John had died, unsealed FBI records show that the Nixon administration was using the FBI to spy on and target him, including tapping his phone, having him followed, and messing with his immigration record, all due to his political activism. Story 20. The MKUltra program by the CIA. For many years, the idea that the U.S. government was conducting mind control experiments on its citizens sounded like something out of a science fiction novel or a paranoid conspiracy theory. However, it was revealed in the 1970s through a series of investigations and declassified documents that the CIA did, in fact, conduct such experiments under the MKUltra program. The program, which began in the 1950s, involved various methods, including administering drugs like LSD, hypnosis, sensory deprivation, and other psychological techniques, often without the consent of the subject. The aim was to explore the possibilities of mind control for purposes such as interrogation and brainwashing. Many of the records were destroyed, but enough evidence has emerged to confirm that MKUltra was real, and its existence has been acknowledged by the US government. Story 21. Something a bit more local, Bulgaria, a country in Eastern Europe, has the highest ratio of hospitals to population on the continent. Over 400 hospitals for 7-ish million people. Half of those hospitals are in the capital, a pop 1.5 to 2 million at. Most of those hospitals are fake, never received a single patient. The doctors working there don't know they're under a contract, if they're even in the country or alive for them. I know how to make them. You really only need starting capital to rent a building and some equipment and bribe 3 parties, 2 of which are the government. No, I don't know anyone in those positions, and a few other small things. The healthcare system in the country pays a flat rate for available hospital beds if you work at the government healthcare provider. There was a scandal recently related to attempts to fire the director of the country's largest emergency hospital. What was almost never mentioned was the reason for the firing. There were 2 other hospitals located in rented buildings on the emergency hospital's property, never received a patient, and the guy or people connected to him was on the board of directors for both of them. Story 22. I constantly beg people to read Heavy Radical, the FBI's secret war on American Maoists. It goes into COINTELPRO and how the FBI was infiltrating various radical groups' political enemies. In this case, they infiltrated a group when there was less than a dozen members, built them up specifically because they were more radical than their counterparts, and then did all kinds of genuinely crazy crap to bring them down, intercepting and doctoring letters between leadership, antagonizing them against other groups, inciting illegal actions, where their undercover agents could identify the most willing and the up-and-coming leaders to either neuter them or have the wrong elements take over, etc. Black Against Empire is another book specifically going into the BPP that goes into this as well. At the forefront of every modern progressive and radical movement is either the FBI or CIA, so they can control it in a way that's advantageous to them in American hegemony. Story 23. I have always laughed at CTs, but some recent events trigger something, namely government opposers or threat to Russian government just falling out of windows. Certain individual with private island and influence and knowledge of a lot of world powers' shady illegal doings ends up dying while in protective custody, and the info disappears later. A nation agitator and president race participant miraculously gets hit in the head Hollywood style from an experienced sniper, and so on and so forth. I can see how people get convinced there are conspiracies, and not all of them are entirely wrong. I love how on Pulse the boys are, as well as this cool Silo book series, and that the government throws made-up theories and controversies that seem so wild to hide stuff they are actually doing. As in, if it leaks, no one will believe the real things. Story 24. We're not alone. Non-human beings exist and are here on Earth, have been for 100s of years. And this is reported by many current and former government officials and citizen encounters. The living space ranges from underground, under the ocean, in space, and in different dimensions. Human governments reversed engineered their craft, have used the craft in very inhumane ways. People have been killed to hide this information. The beings are super intelligent beyond our own brain comprehension. The way they live and travel also goes beyond our own understanding. We've found craft in archaeological digs, bringing up the idea that everything we've been taught relating to human life/religion/evolution could be wrong. We have bodies. The beings range from hybrids, small greys, Nordics, aquatic, reptilian, and plasmoid. Story 25. Crashgate. In a nutshell, Fernando Alonso is starting the 2008 Singapore Grand Prix from quite a bad position, actually. The normal strategy when in a competitive car starting at the back is to load her up with fuel and go as far as you can into the race before pitting. Weirdly, Alonso is instead one of the first to pit. The only possible way this can work is if the safety car comes out due to how the rules are enforced. Well, exactly 1 lap later, Alonso's teammate has a big crash into the wall and brings out the safety car, allowing Alonso to go on and win. At the time, many were accusing Alonso's Renault team of fixing the result due to how convenient it was for the safety car to come out at exactly the right time after the other car crashed. But hey, that's just a coincidence, right? It wasn't a coincidence. It turned out Alonso's teammate was indeed told to crash by the team principal to benefit the team by scoring a win. This all came out in 2009, after the second driver lost his seat for not being quick enough. Story 26. So in 1985, the French government committed terrorism in New Zealand and killed a man by blowing up a boat because the boat was protesting nuclear testing in the Pacific. The entire EU threatened New Zealand with embargoes for basically saying, "What the actual flying crap, France?" The EU ridiculed New Zealand and instead diverted the blame to Israel and made them the laughingstock of the world. It was the French. The French then demanded the expatriation of the spies so they could serve their sentences in France. New Zealand complied. France released the spies after they served 2 years of their 10-year sentence on a tropical island. The failure of Western leaders to condemn a violation of a friendly nation's sovereignty caused a great deal of change in New Zealand's foreign and defense policy. New Zealand distanced itself from the United States, a traditional ally, and built relationships with small South Pacific nations, while retaining excellent relations with Australia and, to a lesser extent, the United Kingdom. Story 27. The Vatican is hiding stuff. Old scrolls, forgotten books, all sorts of stuff. I really don't think this is a conspiracy theory. If you want to have a look at a book/scroll/whatever from the Vatican archive, you need to request that book. Kicker is, they don't publish a list of their inventory, so you need to know what is in there. They won't even tell you if a book is there or not, or they don't want you to see it. To be fair, some libraries work something like that. I study archaeology and had some classes on Christian art history, Christian archaeology. Also, there are a ton of conflicting religious texts out there. It was only when the Eastern Roman emperors, Constantine, Justinian, or Valentinian especially, had their councils that the whole Christian thing was streamlined. There were different Christian communities all around the Mediterranean at first, and they often incorporated local legends and content from other religions. Later on, when 300 to 400, Christianity got a little more prominent. They even had disagreements, to the point where Constantine and later emperors had to step in. Just have a look at the apocryphal writings known today, so you can kind of extrapolate what was around back in the day.